everybody, and welcome to the Voices of Delphi podcast. My name is Sarah France.
And I'm Makayla Davis. And we're two women joined together by a mutual love for the mystical, the magical, and the metaphysical. This podcast is dedicated to conversations on bridging the esoteric with the mundane, reintegrating ancient wisdom with modern day, and inspiring listeners worldwide to awaken the oracle within. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, as this helps keep bringing more of what you love.
All right. Hi, Makayla. Welcome back. Second episode.
I'm very excited. We've got amazing feedback so far, so we're off to a good start.
We are off to a good start. Thank you so much for everybody who has listened and supported, sent in your comments and feedback. It means a ton to me and Makayla, and hearing all of the lovely things that you have had to say have made this week a very, very exciting week for the both of us. So thank you again for all of your support. All right, guys. So today's episode that we have in store is going to be a really, really hopefully grounding episode, especially in the somewhat chaotic time that we're existing in. But as we began last episode with this tradition of a riddle to start off every show, I'll go ahead and introduce that now. So, as a little sneak peek of what the theme of this episode is going to be about, I will share this. Our riddle for today is I am not earned, not won, not proven, yet I am the very ground that you stand on. What am I? So we'll leave you with that to kind of consider what the answer might be, and we'll just jump right into some of our topics for today. So, Makayla, would you like to introduce our first topic?
Yeah, so we're just coming off of the new moon in Taurus, and Sarah and I really wanted to dig a little deeper into this because we're feeling that this is one of those impactful new moons that are happening in 2026 and will kind of lay out a deeper foundation of what's to come with the transits for the rest of the year and all of the new energy that we're moving into. I think Sarah's going to bring up the chart maybe.
Sure, I can go ahead and share that right now.
This new moon in Taurus was a conjunct Ceres in Taurus, and we did dive into her as an archetype and an asteroid in the previous episode. So if you haven't listened to that, you definitely want to check that out. But we also have Chiron moving into Taurus to create a new cycle in the beginning of June coming up of this year, and it's actually going to spend a brief time in Taurus. Actually have the exact dates right here, June 19th to September 18th. You'll have a preview this year, and then it re-enters Taurus again April 14th of next year till May 2034. So when I was eyeballing this chart, I was like, wow, this is actually a good preview of what we should focus on when it comes to
Mhm.
taking care of ourselves and our needs and our values. Because when we get that transition of Chiron entering Taurus for this next cycle, that antenna that Chiron brings up is going to be heightened on some pretty important themes in our life, Taurus themes, which we'll kind of break down for you. But on a just to launch us on a big topic right now, this has to do with your survival and
Mhm.
your resources, right? These basic Taurus words that you probably, if you're into astrology, you hear over and over again, like survival, resources, food, and values. When you begin to flesh this out, Taurus out, it's actually a pretty deep topic we can get into, which is why we wanted to
Mhm.
focus on this today. Pretty important one to focus on. And so it just didn't really look like your usual new moon. It looked like a very important new moon to get grounded in what is of importance to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely mirror everything that you said, Makayla. And I think that it's a really important point that you bring up about Chiron's upcoming ingress into Taurus. I think all my Aries people are like jumping for joy the
Yeah.
fact that Chiron is finally going to leave Aries.
Yeah.
Makayla and I are both Aries suns. We get it. We have been being terrorized by this. There's been so many lessons, so much learning. Don't get us wrong, but
Yeah.
we're ready for it to be out of our sign. But I do think that you're right. This new moon is definitely a significant one and will really come into focus about 6 months from now, right?
Yeah.
When we have that full moon in Taurus, once the sun is in Scorpio, relatively in the same place of the zodiac, right? Highlighting basically what was that seed that was planted at this time.
Yeah.
But like you said, this is a massive topic to get into, not just about the nature and quality of this lunation, but also to talk about Taurus and the story of Taurus and how she presents herself in our lives and how to work with her. So, I guess with that being said, do we just want to jump into maybe some conversation about what Taurus is, what she represents, how she comes up in our lives, and deep dive into this beautiful and also very intense sign?
Yeah. I would love to start with that. So, when you're coming off the backbone of Aries, right? Aries represents the birth of something and this initiation being started and us coming into the embodiment of life itself. And the sign immediately after life itself is Taurus, which is this landscape that gives you an archetype that deals with creating substantial stability, right? And it's an earth sign. So this is manifesting in the physical reality. So that's why it does deal with, planting the seed and creating a garden of
Mhm.
whatever life that has been birthed, right? It could be an idea, it could be an actual physical person. Um, Taurus wants to create this stability and this substance, and it's a
Mhm.
fixed archetype, so it's pretty stable. It likes to stay like holding its pattern, and
Mhm.
to not have a lot of movement, right? So Taurus people tend to not really like change. They tend to like cling on and hold on to things that are important to them, they value to them. And of course, this will look different for every single human as an individual because what you value is just going to be relative to how you're experiencing your life right now. But on the basic level, this general basis of Taurus itself, this is about your survival needs and your necessities of what you need to sustain whatever has life right now. And there is that, comfort that comes along or usually comes along with a Taurus placement or an archetype because wants that comfort in whatever it's holding or sustaining. And Taurus as an archetype values serenity and peace. And I find that those things cannot be achieved if you are compromising what you value. And so I think that's where we pull in values as well with Taurus because we will want to hold on or cling on to whatever we feel brings us, self-preservation, and we'll almost want to hoard it. So the shadow quality of Taurus symbolism can sometimes be hoarding something or clinging on to something too tightly because you feel it's what brings you comfort. And one of the ways I like to invite people in when you're thinking about Taurus in your chart, or if you have any of these placements, or you're having a transit like this, is to make some time for contemplation. And a part of this is I feel rooted in Taurus naturally because, again, this sign wants to kind of relax, kind of be in a peaceful environment, have something stable, right? You can think of somebody
Mhm.
like meditating in a garden, not really having to worry about much, and they have their water, their food, their shelter, they have everything they need to sustain, and they're not expending their energy at something that costs them too much, right? They can sit in a space that feels grounded and stable. And so when you're looking at your Taurus placements, if you have them, the second house in your chart, the sign, the house that has Taurus on the cusp, or a transit even, give yourself that time of contemplation because what arises inside of contemplation is a listening to your body, which is linked to this archetype, and a listening to your senses. And then
Hmm.
I think that's when you can really become connected to your natural instinct. And this leads into this currency.
Hmm.
And, Taurus does roll over things like money. But before we had money, it was our body, our skills, what we could
Hmm.
do for literal work, that became our currency. Could we garden? Could we hunt? These survival skills were natural currencies. And so, given the times that we are in such crazy, crazy world times, this is a new moon moment, I think, to really ponder on what is a currency for you? Like, what are you valuing as a currency, right? Is it your body? Is it your stability? And there's no judgment. Some people need nicer things than others. Some people learn and have these breakthroughs, which will happen with the Scorpio archetype, but I'm going to land my plane very soon so you can talk. Um, but some people will go through these deep transformational processes of what they value, and that's when the Scorpio comes in on the opposite side of that, and it transforms that person on a deep level. And then
Hmm.
that Taurus world of what you need for security and stability and comfort and value, what have you, begins to shift and change. And so when I looked at this new moon, I'm like, oh, collectively and individually. And then this is going to plant that seed. And then when Chiron moves into Taurus, we're really going to have to do that work because that energy antenna is going to be very loud.
Yeah, absolutely. You said so many good things. I've been taking notes as you were talking because
That's
I'm like, yes, like contemplation, body-centered wisdom, all of these things. So to piggyback off of the last thing that you said before I kind of full circle back to the beginning is I think that you're right on the money with this transiting Chiron through Taurus is really going to ask of a lot of people to redefine and reevaluate the way that they relate to income, possessions, the making of money, the maintenance of their material world. And, there's a lot of things that we could throw out there and they could be conjecture. But I mean, simply just looking at some of the ways that even like new technology and AI is really changing the
Mhm.
workplace, right? There is a real potential of a lot of jobs having to be rewritten, right? Because of this new inclusion of technology and AI. And like these are real things that we are likely going to be facing. And I think, for example, I've been hearing a lot of people talk about how it's important to lock in right now on certain skills or assets that can exist independently from this technological revolution that we're going through right now. One example of this would be a personal brand, right? There are certain things that AI technology and just technology in general can't replace. And your personality, your wisdom, your unique perspective on things or your unique approach or method, these are certain things that are never going to be able to be replaced by technology. And I think that you're so right on Taurus being this sign about survival in the sense of like, what can I do with my body and my resources in order to bring in more resources, right? In order to bring in more safety and security, at least in a material and financial way. And so, really having to, like you said, contemplate and consider given the changing landscape, right? Given the changing economy, given the changing world, what is it that can lead me into this next chapter of my, professional, financial, material life? Because things are likely going to be shifting in big ways and in small. But to circle back around to kind of like the beginning of what you were saying about Taurus, I always like to remind people to go back to the very, very basics when they're thinking about how signs manifest, right? So, for example, We have Taurus, an earth sign, and earth signs, when it comes to their polarity, are always going to fall on the feminine side of the spectrum, right? And by feminine, simply meaning that they are about reception and transmutation and internalization more than they are about extroverted outflow of energy, right? And with Taurus, we have a Venus ruled sign. So it's about the reception of Venus, right? Taurus at her core is really about the reception and transmutation of Venus. This process of being on the receiving end of money, accolades, wealth, abundance, possessions, right? And being able to internalize those things, receive them, take them in, and also transform them and transmute them and multiply them into more, right? Taurus is a benefic ruled sign. So, there is this principle in Taurus about how do I take what I've been given and make more of it, right? Make it even more abundant, more beautiful, more long lasting. But I think, one of the things that you brought up that I thought was so interesting is this word contemplation with Taurus. And if you've ever met a Taurus or somebody who has a Taurus heavy chart, you'll know that these people are actually very contemplative. They're thinkers, right? Taurus is oftentimes not thought of in that way traditionally. But they are deep, deep wells of kind of stoic wisdom and knowledge, right? And it's interesting to think about it in those terms because, on the one hand, we see that Taurus is the sign that traditionally exalts, right, or is most supportive to the moon. And the moon, of course, is, at least in my opinion, this planet that is deeply connected to intrinsic wisdom, right? Wisdom that comes from within, information that comes from within. And I liked what you mentioned about Taurus being able to garner wisdom and information by being present in their body, right? And using the wisdom of their five senses to gain information and insight into how they're feeling, what they need to do, right? How they think and perceive and experience the world around them. And, one of the things that I wanted to bring up as well is the decanic journey of Taurus, right? Through the three decans of Taurus. And Taurus, interestingly enough, is actually, at least through the decanic system, both very Mercurial and Saturnian, right? So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the decans, it's this system that originated in ancient Egypt and then was further expanded upon by Hellenistic astrologers and into the Renaissance period as well. And essentially, you separate each zodiac sign into 10-degree subsections. So, three decans for each sign. And they basically describe, the beginning, middle, and end of these larger archetypal stories. And there's two systems of decanic rulership. There is the triplicity system, and then there's the Chaldean system. Primarily, people will use the Chaldean system, but I feel like if you know astrologers, we like to make things more complicated for ourselves. So we'll take into account both of them. But the first decan of Taurus is said to be ruled by Venus and Mercury, right? The second decan of Taurus is said to be ruled by the moon and Mercury. And then the third decan of Taurus in both the Chaldean and the triplicity system is ruled by Saturn, right? So all of this journey through the sign of Taurus is centered in both Mercurial and Saturnian themes, which, when I think of deep contemplation, stoic contemplation, getting quiet and really pondering and thinking upon life and oneself, I very much think about that combination of Mercury and Saturn, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to creating a life that is both abundant in a survivalistic in a survivalist way, right? So that we can just maintain a roof over our head and food on our table and clothing on our back, but also abundant in the sense of, I'm living a life of things that I truly value and align with, right? I get to wake up every day and do things that I actually enjoy and value. What more an important subject matter to sit in deep contemplation on than that, right? Than your value system.
Mhm. 100%. I agree with you on that. And it's interesting you bring that up with the decans because it's just a natural trine between Virgo, which is co-ruled with Mercury, and Saturn, which is co-ruled with Aquarius and Capricorn. So it's pulling in on the grand Earth trine itself,
Hmm.
and how the three actually support all one another on creating that earthly foundation, you know, that's anchored in something that can be practical or built or sensible, but then also can create movement when it's needed, coming from the Virgo's modality of being a mutable sign and being able to have, a pivoting ability, if you will, right?
Hmm.
To look at things differently. But I love, love, love the fact that you use the word intrinsic too, because it is so on brand with Taurus, just knowing
Hmm.
that at the end of the day, when you are stripped down, and I think that's what we can encounter with Taurus, because we will at one point or another have a Scorpio experience where there's this death and rebirth process.
Right.
And it is with those incredibly painful, sometimes abandonment, betrayal, loss, grief that comes under Scorpio, the opposite of Taurus, under those intense situations, because it is naturally inherited that you will have that experience, not to like be doom and gloom, but there is an ending with most things in life.
Hmm.
We don't know what that time looks like, right? We don't know when things are going to end, but we know eventually death comes, whether it's a job or it's your loved one, it's a pet. It is through that loss that we get stripped down to our very core and always have to meet ourselves again on that inner level of what is really important. Like, what do you
Hmm.
really value and what is that worth? And it does need to come from within it. And we learn that it's nice to have these substances outside of ourselves. It's nice to have a fresh pair of shoes and like maybe a nice big house and all that. But at the end of the day, we are the body itself is the thing that we're living in.
Hmm.
And so I feel it's like a part of this journey, or the Taurus journey, is just to remember that at the very end of the day, your body is the portal through which you're experiencing like your entire material world, right? This material world that just exists around you. And at the end of the day, it just comes into your own anchored sense of sensory.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that whenever I talk to people about the Taurus Scorpio axis, right? Because it's so important. Whenever, for all of you listening, whenever you're wanting to dive deeper into the signs, a great avenue for doing that is to consider them as pairs, right? These are not 12 signs that exist in their own vacuum. These are six axes, right, with 12 different faces. And when it comes to Taurus and Scorpio, it's really the axis of stability and instability, right? Survival and death, right? To have and to not have, right? So, a great way to visualize this, the Taurus Scorpio axis in action, is like if you've ever watched an apocalypse movie or a zombie movie or like something like that, right? And there's always that moment at the beginning of the show or the beginning of the movie where, the kids are going to school in the morning and the birds are chirping and the white picket fences are gleaming and the sun is out. It's a beautiful, sunny, peaceful day. So very Taurus, right? Everybody is surviving, everybody is at peace, everybody has what they need, and then boom, something happens. The virus breaks out, right? The meteor crashes, and there is this shock wave that ripples through the world where everybody suddenly comes to the realization that normalcy has gone flying out the window,
Yeah.
right? Taurus is normalcy, right? Whatever your state of normalcy is, right? And Scorpio is the state of crisis and chaos, right? And Taurus is about how do I obtain, right? Or how do I maintain, rather, normalcy and stability when it is present in my life? And Scorpio is about the journey of how do I regain a sense of inner stability, emotional and psychological stability through the development of resilience, right? When in states of crisis, chaos, and instability, right? And they're always working together in tandem. But just to briefly jump back to the decanic journey and in reference to this new moon in particular, when looking at where this new moon is located, right? She happened at 25 degrees of Taurus, which falls in our third decan. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the decanic system, it's so fascinating because not only do we have these additional layers of nuance as far as planetary rulership is concerned, but we also have an added layer of information in so much that they're all associated with one of the pip cards in the tarot. And this third decan of Taurus just so happens to be associated with the Seven of Coins in the tarot. And at its most basic, the Seven of Coins is the card of perseverance and patience, right? There is very much this emphasis in this last decan of Taurus, this dual ruled Saturn decan, about, finding patience in the pursuit of stability, money, financial security, and really holding steadfast, right, in the maintenance of those things in your life, even when it feels monotonous, even when it feels boring, even when it feels tiresome. And, whenever I get the Seven of Coins in a reading, I always think of overwhelm, right? And this idea of overwhelm. And I feel like that's a good segue to briefly kind of talk about something that I was mentioning to Makayla before we started the episode, which is that
Yeah.
for me personally, something that I noticed with this new moon and also in clients is that it was a time when people were starting to feel pretty overwhelmed. There was a lot of overwhelm circulating around the time of this lunation. And I was reading a book a while ago about the idea of overwhelm. And the author said something that really, really stuck with me. She said that overwhelm is not a capacity issue, it's a values issue. I'll say that again. The sense of overwhelm, the feeling of overwhelm and burnout is oftentimes not a capacity issue, it's a values issue. And what she meant by this is that if you wake up in the morning and you have a to-do list on your table next to you that has to get done, and there are 5 things on there, but all of those things do not resonate with the core of who you are. They are not authentic to you. You cannot identify what it is that you value about these things. Then you are likely to look at these 5 tasks for however long they will take you and feel extremely burdened and overwhelmed by them. That very Saturnian kind of energy, right? However, if you wake up in the morning and you look at your to-do list and there's 25 things on there that you have to do, and the grand majority, if not all of those things, align with what you truly value, your intrinsic value system, what brings you joy and pleasure, or you can find a way to connect them back to a certain value if it's not blatantly obvious to begin with, that you are actually likely to not feel very overwhelmed at all, right? And it was fascinating for me to read that because it really struck me. And I don't know about you, Makayla. I don't know how you feel on that statement, but I was like, wow, truer words have never been spoken.
Honestly, that reigns deep, like really deeply true.
Hmm.
One of the things that I have learned through my own personal journey is when you're not doing things that you are truly aligned with and you value with, and yet you're still doing them anyway, it
Hmm.
causes a severe disruption within your psychological and physical body, both
Hmm.
at the same
Yeah.
time. It's like one of the things that I can absolutely piggyback off of what you were learning in your in that book is this uh, topic of cognitive dissonance in the body that happens when people are doing one thing, but they're aligned or they value another. And
Hmm.
that does affect, and not to it's just to get people thinking on this podcast right now because these value things are going to be so loud. The more we go into the astrology coming up with the Chiron, and then also when the eclipses start to activate and they start to square this Chiron when they're in Leo and Aquarius, I think a lot of people are, it's going to be louder of where are your values? And then if you're not aligned, you need to free yourself up, right? You need to
Hmm.
free yourself up from where you're not because the body is keeping score of what it's feeling when it's not in situations that it's aligned in.
Hmm.
It affects your body and it becomes painful over a period of time. It can actually become physically painful, and a lot of people they cope with it because they feel that they need to be with this person for survival, or they need to stay in the situation for survival, or they need to change this, they can't change their job because they need to survive, whatever it is. If you find yourself in these situations where life feels heavy, like you were saying, like your to-do list feels heavy, or the things that you've got on your schedule, or the environment, the job, whatever, it's a good time to restructure your take some time for the contemplation and to look at what is of really important value for you. If you stripped everything down, what is your needs? What is that basic need for survival?
Hmm.
And you can begin to make movements or changes into that new direction, because staying in this pattern or this loop because you think that's what is important to you or you think that's what is of value to you, will start to, you'll be overriding your body's physical responses.
Hmm.
And when you're not listening to your body, you're not listening to the Taurus side of your chart. And it is, it's the second zodiac sign after we meet Aries. Like it is that important. This is life sustainability here. This is what you need to listen to. So coming back to your sense of self, right? And I feel like people will be surprised when you really take the time to contemplate on these things and meditate. I feel like people get really surprised that they're like, I didn't really need that.
Hmm. Yep.
I didn't really need to sustain that. I thought I needed this job to support me, but maybe along that discovery, you actually feel that it's not the job, it's you. It's you doing it. So if you just
Hmm.
take your physical person and everything that you are and you just move it in a new, more aligned place, you're gonna be okay. Like, you're gonna
Yep.
survive.
Absolutely. It's very much that root chakra work, right?
Yeah.
And, coming back again to that idea of the Taurus Scorpio axis always working in tandem. Whenever I see clients who have a very strong Taurus signature in their chart, I always ask them to tell me a little bit about their relationship with complacency.
Mm.
Complacency is a big thing for people who have a Taurus heavy chart. Why? Taurus is a sign that is designed to search out safety, comfort, and security. That is what it's designed to do. And that's an important function, right? As human beings, we all need that function in order to obtain a level of consistency and safety in our lives. However, it exists on this Taurus Scorpio axis, right? And Scorpio is about a sign that embraces inconsistency, instability, change, and flux, right? Taurus is a sign where we have to really be honest with ourselves about whether or not we are just putting our nose to the grindstone, doing the earth thing, right? The methodical, consistent, dependable thing, okay? Putting our nose to the grindstone and plugging away at something and staying in the same role, staying in the same city, staying in the same relationship because it's actually fueling us, right? And feeding back into us, or just because it feels safe or good enough, right? That word enough is a big one for, I think, Taurus people to contemplate and consider, and especially under this new moon, considering the things that have been going on, recently in your life over the last 2 weeks or so that have really been making you consider, you know, are the things that I'm pursuing and pouring into, because Taurus is very much the sign of, pour into something and you shall receive back what you have given to this thing, right? So choose wisely, right? What you're pouring yourself into. Your time, your energy, your resources, they're valuable. They're more valuable than you might even realize or consider. So, over the last few weeks, considering whether you've been pouring into things out of complacency or because they feel comfortable or stable enough and asking yourself, is that really all you want? Right? Are you deserving of more? Do you know you're deserving of more? Do you know you want more for yourself or want something different? Because if that's the case, the other side to the Taurus Scorpio axis is Scorpio, this sign that oftentimes initiates, right, moments of crisis or flux in order to bring about change and evolution, right? So being a proactive creator of those moments of evolution and shift rather than waiting for them to come knocking down your door, I think is an important thing to consider right now. Like you said, especially as we're about to have Chiron entering Taurus, and for better or for worse, we will be forced in some ways, I think, to really get clear on those things.
Yeah.
Um, and it always makes me think of the parable of the frog that accidentally boiled itself to death. Are you familiar with that one?
No, let's hear that.
No? Okay.
Oh God.
So basically, there's this frog, right, who sneaks into this old woman's kitchen and he sees a nice pot of water that's been placed on the stove. And there's a little fire going on underneath it. And he says, "Ooh, this looks like a nice place to rest my body for a little bit." So he jumps on into the pot. And it's like a nice little jacuzzi, nice lukewarm water. And it slowly is heating up over time, right? The flame is not on high, it's on low. So it's slowly heating up over time. And it's just incremental enough that he feels just comfortable enough,
Yeah.
just comfortable enough, just
Yeah.
comfortable enough to the point that the pot eventually boils and he accidentally boils himself to death, right?
Mm.
And that's very much what I think about. With this new moon in Taurus is being mindful and aware of those things, especially because one thing that we didn't mention, but I think is important to note, is that this new moon was conjunct Algol.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, the fixed star Algol is objectively one of the most challenging in the sky, and he's resting right now at about 26 degrees of Taurus. So this new moon happened quite close, right? As close can be. And Algol is deeply connected to this experience, metaphorically and sometimes literally, of the loss of one's head, right? So, thinking about this idea of overwhelm and burnout and kind of losing your head over these ongoing situations because you're slowly boiling yourself to death in a situation that is misaligned or that does not actually resonate with the truth of who you are, I think is to a certain extent at the core of what some of this new moon has been bringing up for people. And
Yeah.
of course, this is a slow burn kind of thing.
Yeah.
A new moon is always going to be something that manifests in a very invisible, subconscious way. And especially a new moon in Taurus, the way that this kind of illuminates itself, it's going to be a slow burn.
Yeah. Absolutely. I
Hmm.
that was a perfect metaphor or like however you want to call it. That was a perfect story for how that shows up. Like it could not be more true.
Hmm.
And it's like one of the gifts I find with Chiron and Taurus is learning to allow yourself to do things at your own pace. And
Mm.
so like if this is resonating, if you're somebody that's listening and you're resonating and you're like, you know what? I could shift my values here. I could change things a little bit here. I could reprogram myself the way I'm like subconsciously wired to believe this is worth my time. And I'm kind of slowly killing myself at this point. You know, Chiron and Taurus is going to give you that time. I find it's a Chiron placement that is like, hey, it's okay to do things at your own time, but just to
Mhm.
be consciously working towards it, at least,
Yeah.
right? Creating some type of movement because things don't happen very fast in Taurus energy. And yeah, it's just a little bit of a slower movement, and the world is moving very fast, and we're gonna feel that pick up when the eclipses start to happen in the Leo Aquarius axis, which is helpful in a way because the eclipses are, new moons and full moons and steroids when those begin to hit. And then also, Aquarius also just wants to
Yeah.
accelerate things anyway. So you will get these little boosts of momentum that I'm sure we'll talk about over the next 18 months, like as we're
Right.
entering eclipse season. You will get these momentums like bursts coming through, but from personal experience, as long as you are making a slow effort or any type of effort towards shifting things to align a life of your values, you know, you won't feel so stagnant. You won't feel like you're killing yourself, right? Like it's taken me years to get this move that I'm moving towards, that I'm doing. And so it's been a slow, long, drawn out process, but then also it's happened pretty rapidly at the same time. So it's like be gentle. If this is resonating for you, be gentle on yourself to know that you know, this just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a virtue that Taurus embodies so well
Yeah.
is, this recognition that Rome isn't built in a day, right? The things that are really worth having in life are built slowly and methodically and intentionally, right? Where we focus on the quality of each step, each minute detail and step. And I think that that's something that Taurus people have naturally kind of hardwired into them. And I think that this new moon is definitely going to bring up some of those themes, just like you say. And especially with it being in this last decan of Taurus. The three decans of Taurus, they take us through the five of coins, the six of coins, and then the seven of coins, right? And the five of coins is notoriously this card that people like to avoid. They don't like to see it, right? Because it's a card that oftentimes is indicative of being in a state of worry or a lack mindset or poverty, right? Is sometimes the way that it's interpreted. But really, for me, thinking about this first introduction into the sign of Taurus, the sign that's all about, okay, how do I get what I need, right? If you come into the world and you don't have that sense of, okay, I need to protect myself, I need to obtain things, right? Then you'd probably just put yourself in a state of, you probably wouldn't survive, right?
Right.
For lack of a better term. So the five of coins is really that introduction into needing to actually obtain things because yeah, there's an inherent sense of lack or worry, right? But then the six of coins, the second decan of Taurus, is about, okay, I've received things, right? So now let me give back, right? It's about that reciprocity that, which I think we're going to touch on later in this episode, which is that, if you're looking to make more money, give more money, right?
Mhm.
If you're looking to get more kindness, give more kindness, right? It's about that reciprocity, that give and take with life. You give to life something of value and beauty, life will give something of value and beauty back to you, right?
Yeah.
But then this final decan of Taurus, the seven of coins, is really where we come to this kind of existential crisis. I find that sevens, if anybody out there listening is a life path seven, I see you. I am too. Um, it's definitely this like number of kind of existential crisis, right? Intellectual crisis, I think sometimes.
Mm.
And with the seven of coins, it's like we've reached this moment where we've gone on this journey to obtain things. We feel like we're doing this reciprocity dance. And also, we're having to sit back and just wait for things to arrive, right? We're being perseverant, we're being patient, but we also don't know when the payout is going to come,
Mm.
right? And so there's this need to, like you said, find patience for yourself at the end of this journey, find patience for, your timeline in particular, and have faith in that. And also, when I think of this last decan in particular, it's like the decan of accountants, honestly, because it's like a decan where you have to really take stock of everything that you've done and everything that you want to do and really consider how it is that you're going to get there, how you've been applying your time, energy, and resources, where your energy has been leaking, where you've been using it effectively, and how to do the Saturnian thing and kind of tighten up the ship, right? In order to get you into that next stage of wealth and abundance. So I know that was kind of a long, drawn out tangent, but I hope that
No, it's perfect.
makes sense.
No, but no, it's good though, the build up just to see how it kind of just flows in its own natural state. And I think it, kind of you kind of cycle through this same
Yes. Yeah.
cycle throughout your entire life on different levels,
Yep.
you know. And it almost feels like most of us spend a lot of time in the middle decan. Like if you were
Yeah.
just to like sit there, learning about energy exchange, which I guess we can flow into this, is like learning about energy exchange and money exchange, since
Hmm.
currency is so deeply connected to this. And,
Yep.
we just live in a society now where we focus on currency as a symbolism of how worthy we are. Um,
Right.
and what I find is like our worth or our income is always going to reflect how we feel inside of ourselves.
Right.
And it's like I don't hate to say like one of those like everyone talks about, well, if you have a money block, you have a worth block, but it really truly is linked to that because then
Hmm.
it affects your confidence, which is coming from the square to Leo, and
Right.
it's coming, and then it affects if you don't have that worthiness inside, it affects in the other square to Aquarius, like your ability to connect and to be free and to look at things in different ways and break through systems, if you will.
Hmm.
And so there's this energy exchange, and we had said before, the shadow side of Taurus is hoarding. And so if you are finding yourself afraid to spend money and you're afraid to exchange energy, you will experience depletion because it is literally just a currency of energy. When you are supporting somebody else, supporting a local business, this money circulates and it goes around and around and around. And so personally, I like to coach women, especially when it comes to like their prices. If you feel connected to what you're giving and offering, and if you truly know what you're offering is worthy, and you are aligned with that on such a core level, and then you meditate and you have a number and a price that comes up to you, make that your number, right? Make that your offering and hold it, like hold steady to it. Don't fluctuate, don't sway, don't shift your values because somebody's kind of arguing, oh, well, this person charges this, right? And it's like, hold steady. That's the positive side of Taurus is to dig those
Hmm.
hoofs into the ground, right? And say, that's great for them,
Yeah.
okay? But I'm me, and this is what I'm worthy of.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me think of my partner. He is a Taurus, Mars and Mercury, and he's a Gemini rising. So his Mercury and Taurus is his chart ruler. He loves to say, "I'm an immovable force." And
I
that
love
it's
that.
like he doesn't realize how he writes the script himself.
Yep.
Because that really is that fixed earth energy, right? An immovable force. So once you find what it is that you value,
Yeah.
hold steady and hold fast, exactly like Makayla says. And also, be willing to change and adapt as your values change and shift, right? Because they do, and they will. And I always think of how, for example, astrology and the system of astrology, it can teach us so many random uh, lessons about life. So, like, for example, people will always talk about, oh, well, if you want to make more money, spend more money, right? Or if you want to get more, give more, that type of thing. But even astrologically, we see that reflected in the fact that the moon, right? The planet that literally, well, planet, the luminary, that literally establishes the presence of cycles and seasons, right? Is the planet that is exalted or happiest in the sign of Taurus, right? She is the planet that is about ebb and flow, wax and wane, give and take, about cycling things. She is very much connected to movement. And I think that that's so interesting that she is best or functions at her best when in Taurus, right? Because it's almost like saying that when you have a planet that is constantly moving, right, and constantly in a state of ebb and flow and give and take, your value system, your money, your bank account will thrive. When it comes to this idea of practicing reciprocity, uh, there's some money practices that I've done over the course of the last few years that I absolutely love to recommend to people. One of them is this idea of giving something away. giving something away for 30 days, right? And it can't just be anything. It has to be something that you actually really like and value, or else it doesn't count. Right?
Yeah.
It's not the same kind of energy exchange. Like you say, it's all about the energy exchange behind it. So something that you actually really love, value, and cherish, give it away. Give it away for free, right? And see how that feels. Notice if you have a hard time doing that. Some
Yeah.
people will. Some people will feel resentful of that. They'll feel like it's a loss. Other people will welcome it and feel like it's a win. But it's fascinating to see how, when you do this as a practice, as like a money ritual, basically, for 30 days or a lunar cycle, even, right? Um, it's incredible to witness how much more opportunity, wealth, and abundance flows into your life
Yeah.
when you are basically signaling to the universe that you are not in a state of worry and you are not in a state of lack, and that you can let go, right? There's nothing that responds better to this principle of if you love it, let it go, like money does.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And it's actually like a very business savvy tip to give out, which is, connecting to the Saturn side of the decan, right?
Hmm.
Because so many entrepreneurs will tell you create a
Hmm.
freebie, right?
Yep.
Create free offerings, right? Because it
Hmm.
builds that trust with your audience and it builds respect even, right? So
Yep.
if you're doing that with other people, it's giving that Saturnian pull, that Capricorn pull into the Taurus vibe of like that respect. Um, it's so funny that you mentioned the Mercurial decan too, because I
Hmm.
don't have it because it's packed right now. But I have had this statue of Hermes, or AKA Mercury,
Yeah.
and I shower him in
Yeah.
$100 bills, right? And in all
I,
currencies, like Thai baht, US
yep.
dollar, everything, like colonies, like I shower that guy in money, and
Yep.
I'll like cleanse the bills every couple of months, and I'll do it
Uh-huh.
again. And I swear, when he was dry, business was dry, and when he was covered in my, so this is just like I love like little statues, and I love to use statues in manifestation work.
Yeah, absolutely. A confession here, everybody. Years ago, when Makayla and I first connected, I went to her home, her beautiful home in Rhode Island. And the first thing that I noticed when I walked in is a little Hermes statue in front of her TV on her altar in her living room, covered in $100 bills. And I said to myself, this bitch knows what's up. She's locked in.
Yep. So long.
So
It works. It totally works.
Makayla is not new to this. She is true to this, everybody.
Oh, oh my God.
But yeah, and it's interesting too to think about how, for example, Mercury or Hermes, right? Greek or Roman, whichever you choose, was the god of merchants, right? And sales. If you've ever met a very Geminian or Mercurial person, could sell water to a fish, right? Truly. Like, and it's this combination of, I think, the Taurus Mercury stuff where it's like, in order to be able to sell something, right, you have to really know the intrinsic value in it. And you also have to be able to, again, that lunar component as well, empathize and feel into and embody why it's valuable, right? And be able to communicate that. So I think you're totally right that, especially from a business perspective, for any of you out there listening who self-identify as entrepreneurs who are working to be more independent financially and professionally, um, really feeling aligned with what you're doing will be the greatest, I guess, accelerator in
Yeah.
your career and professional development. Because when you do not believe in what you are doing, you are not going to attract the same level of abundance and money and opportunity that you will when you really see and feel the value in what it is that you're doing. And when you find that, it's the easiest thing to sell. It's not sales anymore, right? It's just you communicating on that which you love and that which you value. So, absolutely.
I agree with you 100%. And
Hmm.
Lord knows, we've done a million jobs in order to find astrology, you know.
Yep.
So not all of them were aligned. So it's okay. Like we got to
No,
start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere, right? And you just have to kind of throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And eventually you'll find your niche, right? And that's kind of, again, that's the nature of the Taurus journey, is like so much of it is Mercurial and Saturnian, right? Exploration and patience, right? And when it comes to making money, I think, it's interesting too, because it makes me think about any of these books, like, um, for example, I don't know if you've ever read the book Think and Grow Rich.
No, I read another one that's similar to that though.
Okay.
But yeah.
So, for those of you listening, if you ever wanted a fun and super, super inspiring book on manifestation and specifically on money manifestation, You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero is literally my Bible.
Mm.
And conversely, You Are a Badass at Making Money as well. Both of those books, highly recommend them. But she references this book, Think and Grow Rich, who was written by a man named Wallace Wattles. What a name.
Yeah. Yeah.
He basically wrote this book that was way ahead of its time. This is early 20th century, if not very late 19th century. It was either like between the 1890s, 1915 that this book was written, I think. And basically, he writes this book about how the entire universe is comprised of this thinking stuff, right? Call it thought, call it consciousness, right? Whatever you want to call it. And that in order to obtain wealth, you just need to think that you can, right? It's very much the classic, you are what you think, law of attraction,
Yeah.
manifestation kind of principle.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting about this interplay in the Taurus story between Mercury and Saturn of you think it, okay, and then it materializes. Mercury, Saturn. Or, once you think it, right, conversely, then you have to patiently wait to
Yeah.
receive it. Right? You can't get in the way. You can't interject in that process. You have to remain patient and kind of stoic and stalwart in your expectation of these things, right? It's interesting how many layers we can pull
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. And have you heard of Abraham Hicks? I'm sure you've,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Did she teach us like so many things like along the same lines of, just put it out there, ask for it, think of it, but then, don't worry about it. Don't put any counteractive messaging into the universe.
Hmm.
And it does just pull back to your values, right? And
Yeah.
I've told people if I wanted a Lamborghini right now, I could have one. But I don't like seriously, I could, but and I could have for the last 3 years, but I don't want a Lamborghini. Like out of all the cars that I could have bought, I bought a Jeep Wrangler and now I'm cashing that in because I don't really value it anymore. I had my dream
Yeah.
car and now I wanted just a bike, right? So it's like I'm cashing it in for a pink bike, and it's just so if you are centered on your values and then you put that consciousness of what you are anchored into as worth, and then you link your thoughts in a positive manner to that, it is so true to just
Hmm.
wait, be patient, because as long as you're kind of doing your part and taking it day by day, living according to what's important to you, you'll get what you want.
Right.
And not everybody wants a Lamborghini,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Absolutely. She wants her hot pink four-wheeler, guys.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you're so right. And like whenever I think of Taurus, I always think about the analogy of the farmer or the gardener. And it's so cliche, but it's so true, right? And think about, the difference between a farmer who shows up, right, and plants a seed and then tends to the seed every day. He observes the soil. He methodically, looks at the water levels and, the fertilizer and the climate and the temperature and the sunlight and all of these things. And he does all of that mercurial planning, right, and observation and intake of data and information. And then he just waits patiently. He remains present, right? And stoic, okay? And he speaks with love upon this plant, right? And he says beautiful affirmations into the earth, and he gives to the earth that which he likes to see back. Versus, let's take somebody who plants the seed and they obsessively stand by it and say, when are you going to sprout? When are you going to sprout? Where are you? Right? It's like two very different approaches. We would all say that the former is probably more productive and more energetically aligned and abundant
Yeah.
than the latter, right? But when it comes to money, so many of us treat money like that latter example, right? We do one thing and then we scream into the void and say, okay, where's the money? Where's the
Right.
abundance,
Right.
right?
Right.
When in reality, so much of it is about that Venusian principle, right?
Yeah.
Of take your feet off the pedal, right? Take your hands off the steering wheel. Venus kicks her feet up, she relaxes, and she expects good things to come from her.
Yeah.
And it's very much, rooted in that goddess energy for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's actually a great tie-in for what we want to talk about subliminal messaging
Hmm.
as well. One of those things is paying attention to obviously what you're feeding your body. That can cause messaging on the physical plane, right? If you feed your
Hmm.
body so much sugar, for instance, right? And then you're not going to feel good, right? First off, you're just not going to feel good if you're not feeding or tending to your physical body in those ways. But then also that comes through music, messaging, movies, TV, scrolling, doom scrolling on social media, all of this other stuff can feed you through that mercurial way of your worthiness or where you're at. So
Hmm.
being very mindful because this will help you increase your own personal sense of self-worth, which will increase your vibration, which will increase your attraction level and your ability to just kind of kick back and relax and allow yourself to receive these things, right? But, it's one of our ways that we thought this would be a positive way to bring up how to work with this specific topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when it comes to this idea of self-worth, right? And our value system, it
Mhm.
really is the entire foundation upon which our whole existence rests on, right? And we see that in the way that, for example, we have Aries, the sign of birth and selfhood and identity, right? That is followed by Taurus, right? The sign of values and stability and worth, and self-worth. And then even in the house systems, right? We have the first house. Now, caveat here, one thing I will say as an addendum, please do not equate the signs with the houses. They are not equal.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of you listening out there, that drives me crazy. But I digress. We have the first house, which is the house of selfhood and our identity, and in many ways, our outlook on life and our ability to assert our destiny and our place in the world. And then, what is the house that is the floor beneath which the first house rests upon? It's the second house, the house of our belongings, our possessions, our self-worth, and our ability to get from life that which we desire and that which we need. So when it comes to the work that we're talking about here, it's extremely important to do, and it really is the foundation for everything that you will do and achieve and become. When they say that you are what you eat, right? They're not just referring to food. It's, you are everything that you intake, just like Makayla said, whether it's podcasts, YouTube, food. And it's so important to be mindful of those things because they do inform you, whether you realize it or not, on who you are, where you're going, and how you show up in the world.
Yeah. Which is why we're trying to create the best subliminal messaging in our
Hmm.
podcast
Yeah.
for all of you to enjoy and increase your self-worth.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think subliminals are so good. For a while, I would listen to them as I was going to sleep. You can find like a ton of them online on YouTube. It's like 8 hour long videos of just like, abundance and health subliminals that can play while you sleep. So I love those. Another thing that I think is super, super powerful is recording these messages, right, in your own voice. It really is spell casting in action, ladies and gentlemen, right? Taking the time to actually write down your own affirmations that feel resonant with you, that you need in this moment, and then recording them in your own voice and listening to them back. Or saying them to yourself in the mirror, all of these things can be very, very powerful. They hit deeper, I think, than just listening to pre-recorded things.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Hmm.
And I guess I would just add mirroring, like having the people in your life around you mirror the same values back. And that might shift and change. And so your local community, your groups of friends, and the people that you hang out with, that can be a part of that painful process when you're doing like all this self-worth work and you change as an individual
Yep.
because you might not resonate anymore. That comes to, well, that's probably going to happen a lot for people anyway with the eclipses coming up in the squares to the Chiron and Taurus, because coming from the Aquarius side, who are you hanging out with when your values are being required to shift?
Yep.
And that really can become a difficult thing to go through, but also necessary for you to really create the life that you want to embody and the stability and that structure. When you're in an environment, again, you're creating that cognitive dissonance as well when you're surrounded by other people that aren't reflecting or mirroring back that same value system for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think about how, for example, it's not just Venus that we look at when it comes to wealth and abundance, right, in our lives. It's also Jupiter in a lot of ways, in bigger ways. It's Jupiter,
Yeah.
right? And especially when it comes to worldly kind of material success. And Jupiter just so happens to have his joy in the 11th house, right? The house of your wider network and community and the people that you associate with, not necessarily in an intimate way, right? In a seventh house kind of way, but in a colleague or larger community or larger network kind of way.
Wow.
And it's always seemed interesting to me that the planet of wealth and true abundance and worldly success is best supported when in a place of the chart that talks about who you surround yourself with, your
Mhm.
wider network, right? Because again, talking about these houses that are succeedant to the angular houses as the supportive network to them, right? The 10th house being the angular house of your profession and legacy and, what you end up achieving in life, your impact on the world around you, being supported best by your community and who you surround yourself with, right? When your mom said to you, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are, she wasn't lying.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. These are like basic things that we will hear over and over again, but ring so true. So it's just really important to flesh it out.
Was the last little, I guess, practice or technique that I wanted to mention. So I think we will sign off for today. So thank you all so much for joining us for today's episode. Please let us know below your thoughts and if there are any topics that you would like us to address in the future. We are open arms and open ears. Again, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe if you enjoyed this so that we can keep bringing more of what you love to your For You page. And Makayla, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.